This morning on our national security challenges and U.S. military activity in North and South America. We have the commanders of both North and Southcom with us today. I must first, since this again is a hybrid hearing, read the statement that explains how the hybrid hearing will be conducted. Members who are joining remotely must be visible on screen for the purposes of identity verification, establishing and maintaining a quorum, participating in the proceeding, and voting. Those members must continue to use the software platform's video function while in attendance unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render them unable to participate on camera. If a member experiences technical difficulties, they should contact the committee staff for assistance. Video of members' participation will be broadcast in the room and via the television/internet feeds. Members participating remotely must seek recognition verbally, and they are asked to mute their microphones when they are not speaking. Members who are participating remotely are reminded to keep the software platform's video function on the entire time they attend the proceeding. Members may leave and rejoin the proceeding. If members depart for a short while for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, they should leave the video function on. If members will be absent for a significant period or depart to join a different proceeding, they should exit the software platform entirely and then rejoin it if they return. Members may use the software platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical support issues only. Finally, I have designated a committee staff member to, if necessary, mute unrecognized members' microphones to cancel any inadvertent background noise that may disrupt the proceedings. Thank you. As I was saying at the start, our committee hearing is on national security challenges, U.S. military activity in North and South America. We have with us today Mr. Robert Salesses, performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland, Defense and Global Security. We have Admiral Craig Fowler, U.S. Navy, Commander, U.S. Southern Command, and General Glen VanHerck, U.S. Air Force Commander, U.S. Northern Command, and North American Aerospace Defense Command. And I thank you all for being here. We look forward to the discussion. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges going on in the world right now, and the one that dominates is COVID, its impacts, how it's impacting your commands, how it's impacting stability in your areas of responsibility. We are very interested to hear how it is going in terms of making sure that we protect our service members, maintain our ability to train, and meet our readiness requirements, and at the same time, how COVID may be impacting your areas of responsibility. Obviously, there is a great deal of instability, in particular in South America. 2 hurricanes, continued economic challenges. We have the ongoing crisis in Venezuela, and we've seen the impact in terms of the flow of folks coming to the border. There are a lot of challenges in that region. We'd be anxious to hear, from Admiral Fallon about the details of that and how best we should respond and work with partners in the region to meet those challenges as they impact that region, and certainly as they impact us once you come further north. Also curious to hear from both of you about your thoughts on the border, what role you can play in helping us deal with that challenge, and what the best policy is going forward as we try to deal with what is undeniably a very challenging situation, as said, driven by the incredible instability in Mexico as well as more so in Central America. So we need to figure out how to address that issue. And one thing I'm curious, as I mentioned yesterday, we don't yet have a budget, which is problematic and challenging. I do understand the transition to a new administration, but it is mid-April, so the sooner we get that, the better we'll be able to meet our responsibilities in terms of passing the National Defense Authorizing Act this year, and of course the appropriators would also like to see the budget. But I'm curious about what your initial insights are on how that budget might impact you. I think one of the great challenges, particularly in Southcom over the course of the last 20 years, is there's been so much going on in the rest of the world that Southcom tends to be pretty far down the priority list. When you look at what has been going on in CENTCOM, the pivot to Asia, even a number of the challenges that have cropped up in Africa, how do we meet all of those responsibilities and still do enough in Southcom? And similarly, how this impacts Northcom's budget. And I know, General VanHerck, you have been particularly focused on the Arctic, and that is something that, speaking for myself and for others, we don't understand that issue as well as we should. And I think in part because of all those other challenges that we've had, adding what seems like a new one is a challenge. But we've got to understand what's going on up there. Obviously, Russia has been very active in that area. And I guess lastly, based on our conversation before the hearing, I'm very curious to get your take on how you perceive the threats to the homeland. The rise of both Russia and China in terms of their global capability, North Korea as well, has introduced a level of threat to the homeland that we haven't seen before. How do we need to respond to that? What is the most intelligent spending we can do in the Department of Defense budget to meet those challenges? And then what's the whole of government response as well? Because obviously this is not just, none of the challenges that I just talked about are just the military. How do we work with the entire different pieces of our government to meet those challenges? I look forward to the testimony and to the questions and answers. And with that, I will yield to the ranking member, Mr. Rogers, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing today. The defense of the homeland and our security efforts in the Western Hemisphere are becoming increasingly more complex as China and Russia and other adversaries expand their reach and improve their capabilities to strike us. Northcom is charged with defending our homeland against those threats, operating our missile defense systems, countering increased Russian and Chinese activity in the Arctic, and supporting civilian response to emergencies are just a few of Northcom's many mission priorities. Supporting these missions should continue to be a priority for this committee. In recent years, China and Russia have established an extensive military and economic presence in South and Central America. Their presence destabilizes the region and threatens our national security. Southcom is responsible for countering those threats. Southcom relies on security cooperation programs, humanitarian and disaster response assistance, and counter-narcotic capability building to promote security and counteract the influence of China and Russia. It's important for the committee to continue our bipartisan support of these programs. I have no doubt the men and women of North and Southcom can successfully carry out their critical missions, but they will only be able to do so if we provide them the resources they need. That's why I greatly was disappointed with the President's top-line budget number of $715 billion requested for DOD, which constitutes a nearly $5 billion cut in real dollars. It also completely disregards the recommendation of the Bipartisan National Defense Strategy Commission. To counter the growing threat from China, Deputy Secretary Hicks and the rest of the commissioners urged Congress to grow the defense budget this year by 3 to 5%. This budget doesn't even keep pace with inflation. My biggest concern is that this request fails to ensure our military can deter the growing threat from China and Russia. General VanHerck and Admiral Fowler are dealing with these threats every day. I look forward to their best military advice on the impact of their operations from a budget that fails to keep pace with inflation. And with that, I thank the witnesses for their service to our country, for being here, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Salesses, I believe you are first.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on the national security challenges faced by the United States and the U.S. military activity in North and South America. I'm honored to be here in the company of Admiral Fowler and General VanHerck. Today, I'd like to emphasize 3 key points. First, today's global security environment is more complex than ever before. Our adversaries are developing capabilities to challenge us in every domain, and increasingly to hold the homeland at risk. Second, consistent with the President's strategic guidance and Secretary Austin's priorities, DoD is strengthening the multi-domain defense of the nation to maintain our competitive advantage. And third, domestic emergencies and disasters are increasing in severity, causing DoD's federal, state, and local partners to rely more and more on the Department of Defense. The increasing complex and dynamic global security environment is driven by the accelerating strategic competition with Russia and China, where both are engaged in aggressive military modernization programs designed to target what they perceive as DoD's strategic vulnerabilities. China has become more capable in every domain and constitutes a significant long-term security threat to the U.S. China is our top priority, while Russia presents a near-term threat. Within the Western Hemisphere, to the north, Russia is expanding its Arctic posture, and China has classified itself as a near-Arctic nation, raising concerns with both nations' intentions. To the south and Central and South America, a key strategic region, China and Russia are attempting to increase their influence within the region. As DoD confronts this competition with Russia and China in every domain, it must also ensure its ability to deter today's range of threats, including those posed by Iran and North Korea, while countering terrorism and violent extremists both abroad and here at home. DoD is committed to strengthening its decisive advantage in defending the U.S. homeland by reinforcing our defenses in the approaches to North America, and by building stronger partnerships to advance freedom, prosperity, and security throughout the Western Hemisphere. DoD, as the region's partner of choice, is working closely with our hemispheric neighbors to address the region's shared challenges through security cooperation programs. DoD also continues its support of interagency efforts to disrupt transnational criminal organizations and to counter trafficking of illicit narcotics in the region. COVID-19 significantly challenged our hemispheric partners. With congressional support, DoD provided and will continue to provide medical assistance to our partners. In defense of the homeland, DoD must be ready for future conflicts that will likely include multidimensional targeting of critical infrastructure. The United States and Canada are jointly working to increase capabilities to provide enhanced indications and warning, to detect aerospace threats and cue our air and missile defense systems against them. DoD is strengthening its homeland missile defenses through the development of next-generation interceptors and a new generation of ground and space-based sensors. In defending the U.S. maritime approaches, DoD has taken steps to enhance its awareness of activities on and under the sea, provided early warning of approaching maritime threats. DoD is successfully competing with adversaries in cyberspace by defending forward to disrupt and degrade malicious cyber activity close to its origin and improving response options. As a DoD mission, DoD regularly provides defense support of civil authorities to federal, state, and local partners. The COVID-19 pandemic has posed an unprecedented challenge on our nation. Since the start, DoD has protected its people and supported the nation's response by providing unparalleled support to include medical assistance, supply and acquisition support, and the development, distribution, and administration of vaccines. Recent hurricanes and wildfire seasons have challenged response efforts and driven increased requests for DoD capabilities. Hemispheric challenges and events in the homeland have also led to increased requests for DoD support. At the southern border, DoD continues to support DHS's border security mission and HHS's mission to shelter unaccompanied children. DoD also continues its support to the U.S. Capitol. In conclusion, DoD is strengthening its defense of the homeland, building stronger partnerships in the Western Hemisphere, and assisting more than ever our federal, state, and local partners. It is an honor to serve alongside our nation's military and civilian members of the Defense Department as they work every day to keep our nation safe and secure. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I would also like to express my appreciation for the support of the Congress, and thank you for your continued commitment and support of the men and women of the Defense Department.
Thank you. Admiral Fowler.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I'm honored to be here with my shipmates, General Glen VanHerck and Assistant Secretary Bob Salises. Now more than ever, I feel a deep sense of urgency about the global threats we face, including in this region. The Western Hemisphere is our home, it's our shared neighborhood, and it's a hemisphere which is of vital national interest to the United States. Two of the most significant threats are China and transnational criminal organizations. As the Indo-PACOM commander, Admiral Davidson, stated, China is the #1 strategic threat of the 21st century. I'd like to take a few minutes to do some myth busting about these threats. Myth 1, China's interest in the Western Hemisphere are purely economic. The Chinese Communist Party, with its insidious, corrosive, and corrupt influence, seeks global dominance. Our strategic approach to China must also be global. China is quickly growing its influence here in the hemisphere, working on more than 40 port deals, dishing out significant loans for political and economic leverage, pushing its IT infrastructure, and engaging in predatory practices such as illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, all with little concern for human rights, the environment, or the rule of law. Myth 2, transnational criminal organizations are just drug trafficking organizations and only a law enforcement problem. To be clear, transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, pose a direct threat to our national security. They traffic in arms, humans, drugs, and claim tens of thousands of lives here in the United States each year. Their murderous tactics have resulted in 43 of the 50 most violent cities in the world in this hemisphere. They drive illegal migration, and they allow bad actors like China to gain influence. Myth 3, the military has no role to play in this region. Our professional U.S. military men and women in the region serve as an example every day as we collaborate through education and training, exercises, and humanitarian assistance. DoD has established programs to help partner nations develop diverse and inclusive militaries that respect the rule of law and human rights. Our programs help develop the professional forces to secure and stabilize our hemisphere. Our security cooperation programs include institutional capacity building that make partner nation forces resilient to corruption and external influences. Our exercise program develops readiness, interoperability, and the ability to respond regionally to threats. We provide not only positive role models, but tools and strategies for our partner nations to implement that enhance their capacity, and they make us all stronger together. Underpinning those national security threats is growing fragility in the region. COVID-19 has hit the hemisphere hard. According to the IMF, the economies of Latin America and the Caribbean shrank by 7.4% in 2020. The impacts of the pandemic will alter the hemisphere for years to come. In the midst of this pandemic, back-to-back major hurricanes devastated Central America, creating even greater instability. The pandemic and these unprecedented storms struck on top of the already vicious circle of threats that I previously highlighted, creating strong push factors for the people of the region to head north in search of safety and basic needs. Despite an economy in a tailspin and more than 5 million refugees fleeing the country, the illegitimate Maduro regime continues to cling to power in Venezuela with support from Cuba, Russia, Iran, and China. We cannot face such daunting challenges on our own. The only way to counter these threats is to strengthen our partnerships in order to win the strategic competition. No one nation is as strong as all of us working together. And I'm very impressed by the nations who have worked with us shoulder to shoulder to counter the threats. For example, last year, Colombia brought together more than 24 nations to conduct Operation Orion 6, a countering transnational criminal organization operation. And earlier this year, Brazil became the first Latin American country to send forces to our high-end U.S. Army training at Fort Polk, Louisiana. Good neighbors are there to help when you need them the most, especially during a crisis. We provide humanitarian assistance to our partners when COVID struck, and we did it at the speed of relevance, delivering field hospitals and critical PPE. To date, we have executed 498 projects in 28 countries with a total investment of $72 million. This is making a difference. Southcom works every day to build readiness and professionalism of our trusted military and security partners. Modest investments in intelligence, security cooperation, and presence go a long way in this hemisphere and will help us and our partners counter these global threats. Finally, our success would not be possible without our most important resource, our people, our Southcom team and their families. And we are taking proactive steps to support them and to protect our force from unacceptable behaviors like sexual assault and harassment, racism, and extremism. We take these threats seriously because it's key to readiness, and it's the right thing to do. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Rogers, on behalf of the Southcom team, thank you for the trust you place in us, and thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Admiral. General VanHerck.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, distinguished members of the committee, it's a privilege to testify before you today. I'm honored to serve as the commander of United States Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command, and I'm grateful to appear alongside Mr. Salasys and Admiral Fowler as they are crucial partners in homeland defense. U.S. Northcom and NORAD are separate commands charged with the critical mission of defending North America. U.S. Northcom is the U.S. Geographic Combatant Command responsible for defense of the homeland, defense support of civil authorities, and theater security cooperation with Canada, Mexico, and the Bahamas. NORAD is the binational command that provides aerospace warning, aerospace control, maritime warning for the United States and Canada. Over the last year, NORAD fighters, tankers, and airborne early warning aircraft responded to numerous incursions into our air defense identification zones. Multiple ships sortied under U.S. Northcom operational control to defend our maritime approaches, and U.S. Northcom synchronized the Department of Defense's support to lead federal agencies in the fight against coronavirus, multiple hurricanes, and wildfires. No matter the threat, we are always ready to defend the lives of our citizens and our homelands. As thousands of service members provide life-saving vaccinations to our citizens, the threats we face and the pace of change in the geostrategic environment continue to advance. We have entered an era of renewed global competition, and this time we're facing two nuclear-armed peer competitors. Our competitors are focused on circumventing our defenses, both kinetically and non-kinetically, from all directions and in all domains, and exploiting a perceived gap between our foundational homeland defense, our nuclear deterrent, and also our conventional homeland defense deterrent capabilities. Concurrently, the rise of transnational criminal organizations and the subsequent instability they create has generated opportunities for our competitors to exploit. We must adapt to the challenges posed by this reality. We must outpace our competitors by accelerating efforts to transform into a culture that thinks and operates globally and invests early and often in relationships with our allies, partners, and other like-minded nations. Our culture must also adapt and cultivate talent within the ranks and counter extremist and destructive behaviors that oppose our values. In addition, we must factor in homeland defense into every strategy, plan, force management, force design, acquisition, and budgetary decision so we can deter in competition, de-escalate in crisis, and if we must, defeat in conflict. To do this, U.S. Northcom is building capability to deter and, if needed, defend against increasingly advanced global all-domain threats. In concert with the other 10 combatant commands, the recent global information dominance experiment highlighted the effectiveness of operating without geographic seams to execute coordinated actions across all combatant commands. In coordination with the Missile Defense Agency, United States Strategic Command, United States Space Command, U.S. Northcom is maintaining and improving upon our nation's ballistic missile defense capability. And together with the Canadian Armed Forces, NORAD is in the early stages of modernization and building additional military capabilities in the Arctic. In order to balance our readiness for crisis and conflict, we're also staying in global competition. We are placing significant emphasis on left-of-launch framework. This framework grants decision makers increased decision space and more deterrence and de-escalation options vice in-game kinetic defeat. Our priority effort is all-domain awareness that uses a layered open sensor data architecture, machine learning that enables information dominance and decision superiority. This framework provides flexible response options to deter, deny, or if required, defeat every threat to the United States and Canada. U.S. Northcom and NORAD service members and civilians take solemn pride in executing the Secretary of Defense's top priority by standing watch to defend our nation against all threats, whether posed by competitors, natural disasters, a pandemic. I am grateful for the trust and responsibility that you place in U.S. Northcom and NORAD, and thank you for the opportunity and support and time. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is our first hearing this year where we are going in reverse order, just to keep things interesting, I guess. So we're starting at the bottom, working our way up. I will ask just one question before yielding to Mr. Rogers, and that is, General VanHerck, we talked a little bit about the Arctic, what is going on up there. Can you give us just, what should we do? I know we're waiting to see the budget, what our investment is, but as the commander in this area, if you had like your 3 priorities for how we need to be responding to what's happening in the Arctic, what would they be?
Thanks, Chairman. First, to compete in the Arctic, you have to be on the field, and currently our capabilities, I would assess that we're in the game plan development. We're not able to have the persistence that I need to compete day to day in the Arctic. My priorities start with domain awareness. It starts with the ability to communicate and provide data and information so that we can operate and have persistence in the Arctic. I'm grateful for $46 million that have been provided towards this. We've got 10 satellites currently on orbit with approximately 100 more that'll be in the future. And we'll take that additional money and have 2 companies providing satellite capability. But to be persistent, you also have to be on the playing field, and that requires fuel so that Coast Guard cutters, Navy destroyers, and cruisers can remain persistent in the Arctic. And I have a requirement that's stated and validated for fuel north of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. And that would give us the persistence, as well as also additional infrastructure for our ISR platforms and our fighter capabilities so that we can compete on a day-to-day basis and be close and present with the Russian activities. They've dramatically modernized and increased their capabilities in the Arctic. I'm encouraged by the President and also the Prime Minister for discussing NORAD modernization. I look forward to the Department putting a framework together with the Ministry in Canada to move forward with continued modernization.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rogers.
And I share the Chairman's concern about the Arctic, and I'm glad to know that you're on top of it, and we want to make sure you have what you need to stay on top of that. To that end, and I would ask this of both Admiral Faller and General VanHerck, if your funding does not at a minimum keep pace with inflation, how does it impact your ability to meet these challenges from China and Russia that you described in your various AORs? Admiral Faller, I'd start with you. I know you and I talked a lot about what China's doing in South America.
Certainly, prioritization is going to have to happen and always needs to happen versus all the various needs. We'll make our strong case for why winning the day-to-day competition, particularly in our neighborhood, given the proximity that we share, and proximity matters to threats, and given the people that the people ties, why that matters. We'll lay that out. It's a modest investment in this hemisphere. We have about 1% of the intelligence assets assigned to the United States Southern Command. Intelligence drives everything. And then add security cooperation, where we have had received great support from Congress last year. I think there's additional investments that could be made there to help partner capacity. And then finally, assets. Being on the field is important. We must be heard and seen in order to win the competition. And winning the competition is so critical globally so that we don't have to go into confrontation and have a war.
I would say that a couple things. First, I look forward to seeing the FY22 budget when it comes out to actually get a understanding of where we are with regards to future funding. In the near term, we understand the top line of $715 billion. We'll be able to exist and work just fine in the near term. Long term, I would be concerned if we don't keep up with the pace of inflation, of the potential for us not to keep pace with our peer competitors throughout the globe. So I think it's crucial that we maintain a funding pace within the inflation role. We're going to certainly be able to continue our modernization efforts. We'll focus on sustainment, but we'll also need to focus on efficiencies and what capabilities and legacy capabilities that we may need to divest to enable us to go forward with the approach that I discussed in my opening statement and that's in my posture statement.
Yeah, would you describe the threat or the activity pace of China in particular as growing in your AOR? Is it static? Admiral.
China's increasing their influence across all elements of their power, from IT, cyber, information, particularly in the military. It's insidious. It's right below the threshold of what you would observe, but the gifts in tens of millions of dollars that they're offering, their expansion of the PME program, mirroring what we do at Leavenworth and all our great schools, and then opening up even further, offering cyber engineering scholarships with full Mandarin immersion to second lieutenants at various forces. It's picked up at an alarming pace.
So it's an aggressively growing threat.
It's aggressive.
Okay, General.
I share the same sentiment as Admiral Fowler, Congressman. China is absolutely taking aggressive steps in the Western Hemisphere and in the Northcom AOR through COVID diplomacy, additional actions with buying up businesses, capability, especially tourism industry in the Bahamas, trying to gain additional access, 5G, trying to stand up their 5G in the Western Hemisphere.
So am I hearing you correct then, if the activity by the Chinese, and not to mention the Russians and the others you got to worry about, is aggressively growing, if your funding is static or less than what you received last year, are you going to be able to effectively meet those challenges, Admiral?
I believe the front line of competition is right here in this neighborhood, Chairman. We'll have to come forward and determine what that means and ask ourselves tough questions about where prioritization is. And I think modest investment here goes a long way to assuring the security of the United States.
Congressman, I believe we have to balance balance back into the Western Hemisphere to focus on things going on right here in our neighborhood. We have a unique opportunity to do that right now. I look forward to seeing what the 22 budget does and where the department's going in the Western Hemisphere. But I do believe that we need to apply additional resources and funding here.
Yeah, and I do too. And that's the thing the point I'm trying to make is this is not brain surgery. If the Chinese are increasing, as they've stated, their funding by 7%, and I think that's not true. I think it's more than that. But their declared increase in defense spending is 7%. If we do not fund you at least at the rate of inflation, and hopefully in align with the National Defense Strategy Commission's recommendation of 3 to 5% increase, then we are doing you and our country a great disservice. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for keeping it interesting by starting at the bottom of the virtual dais today. Thank you to the witnesses for your testimony and your service to our country. I find the conversation about the aggressive actions of China in our shared neighborhood to be very disconcerting. And I share, Admiral Fowler, you put quite a bit of information both in your written and oral testimony today about the ways in which China is seeking to increase its influence in our shared neighborhood. And I want you to know that as somebody who represents a district in Florida, I'm a near neighbor. And so it's something that I'm very concerned about and determined to do something about. And yesterday I introduced a bill to require the State Department, the Department of Defense, and the intelligence community and the National Security Council to jointly prepare a holistic assessment for Congress containing both an unclassified and a classified section on China's efforts to expand its influence in South America, Central America, the Caribbean, and Mexico, and how these efforts compromise U.S. interests. You know, I think it goes to what we need this assessment so that we can answer the question that the ranking member is posing about precisely what military, diplomatic, and economic activities China is conducting in the region, and then how we prioritize our response. For my part, I'm particularly concerned about the CCP's relationship with the authoritarian regimes in Venezuela and Cuba, and the security implications of these investments in the deepwater ports that were mentioned already, as well as their export of technology to governments that could use it to monitor and repress their citizens, their exportation of their autocratic dystopian technology. But, you know, budget aside, what are 3 specific things that you think the U.S. should be doing, which we're not currently doing, to combat China's malign activities? Admiral?
Thank you for the question. Importantly, thanks for visiting with SOCOM and Special Operations Command South this week to hear up front their concerns and challenges and opportunities. The whole of government solutions, whole of nation solutions are so important here. And there is more to do working together, both in prioritization and coming up with actionable steps. And you highlighted the importance of whole of government steps. Within the department, I cite the 1% intelligence. We have to leverage data, big data, machine learning, and AI in an innovative way that recognizes that the threats are stealing that And as a nation of laws, we rightly have to buy it and protect it, but we need to leverage it in a way that represents the 21st century within the department. It goes along with my shipmate Glen VanHerck's comment about all domain awareness and how we tie this all together holistically so we can make decisions based on what the threat is doing, not what the threat did years and years ago. And then finally, back to being on the field to compete, the right level of presence. Recent trip to Guyana, massive untapped oil reserves. ExxonMobil's in there in a big way. It's a complicated partnership with China. China is leveraging it, a country with a 50% disputed border. Florida National Guard, state partner, is the main muscle mover for things that we're doing in Guyana. And so how do we best leverage all our elements in the DoD with the right authorities? I think there's more that we could offer our Guard and Reserve in that regard to help us get in there and compete day in and day out.
Thank you. And speaking of whole of government approaches, with regards to the rise in transnational criminal organizations, are there lessons that can be learned from our decades in CVE? And then do you believe that we are approaching the transnational criminal organizations in the right way with law enforcement in the lead? Are there other ways in which DoD could play a more robust role?
Transnational criminal organizations are a national security imperative. They're driving the insecurity across the hemisphere, and particularly in the Northern Triangle, Central America region. There is a crisis, and it is the crisis of insecurity that's driving people to find safety elsewhere. And our approach has been one of interdiction at the source and in transit. We're never going to interdict our way out of this. We've got to adopt and adapt some of the lessons that we've learned the hard way over a generation in the counterterrorism fight to model the networks and then take a network approach to get after the center of gravities. And DoD is a supporting element.
General Lady's time has expired, and I should warn the witnesses, once we get to the end of time, I don't want to cut you off, but if you could wrap up as quickly as possible once we hit 0, that would be great. Mr. Moore, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share Representative Murray's appreciation for the switched up in the order today. None of my questions have been asked yet. I don't know what to do with all this power. I want to thank the witnesses as well, in particular, your message about myth busting. Our ongoing presence in the Middle East and the increased awareness of emphasis on the Indo-Pacific can't overshadow, making sure that we protect our neighborhood and in the North and South America. So I appreciate this conversation today. And with that, with the challenges that do exist in the Western Hemisphere, I think it's important to highlight the wins that we've had and learn from those, as you just started to comment. As NATO's only global partner in the region, Colombia continues to be a regional model on how to progress beyond the drug-fueled internal conflicts. Could you continue to expound on lessons learned from that relationship and what we can do and maybe apply that to the Northern Triangle?
Thank you, Congressman. Plan Colombia was a 10-year, about $1 billion a year investment by the United States, and the Colombians matched that with their talent and their money 2 to 1. We stuck with it for 10 years. So it was consistency over time and addressing every element of the whole of government, truly whole of government in Colombia. We also brought in other nations that contributed, and Colombia has a close relation because of their experience in the Korean War with South Korea. Other nations contributed to this in a million different ways, and importantly, and that has left a legacy of professionalism. Not perfect, we're not perfect, but the Colombians do the right thing for the right reason. I'm proud to serve alongside professionalism particularly. They've adopted some of our own human rights programs within their military that have paid off when their forces have been confronted with really tough situations. I think there's things to be learned from that to develop a long view approach to Central America and not a cyclic start, stop, 6 months, 1 year that we see and have seen as we've studied best practices.
I think it's a great point to make as our nation, tries to find the right balance for immigration policy. And if we can implement that in the Northern Triangle, I think there's lots to learn there. So thanks for that. And it's a great opportunity for us to show where our defense-related world can interact with some of our domestic policies. I'll continue on with Admiral Fowler, but welcome comments from other witnesses. Just with, we're going to, that region, the Latin American region may recover last from COVID-19, as you've said in your testimony. Are we doing enough to combat China's presence, and is there anything else we can do to make sure to get out ahead of that?
COVID was like a perfect storm on the hemisphere. The fragility that existed from the transnational criminal organizations and their day in, day out violence, young institutions, young democracies that are plagued with corruption, has just fueled this. The conditions in Central America they rival the Great Depression here in the United States in terms of how hard it's hit. And more needs to be done. This has opened a door for China and Russia to a lesser extent. We see it in their vaccine, heavy-handed vaccine diplomacy. New York Times ran an excellent article that cited a couple countries where they're using the vaccines to leverage a shift to Taiwan. They're using the vaccines for better deals, and this is China using it for better deals for 5G and Huawei, for example. And so we've got to come forward with positive, proactive results for these countries to help them. Things like our Developmental Finance Corps are the right idea through the BUILD Act at the right time. The DoD has a role as we stay engaged professionally.
Welcome additional comments. Okay to pass if not.
Well, I would agree. I think there's an opportunity for whole nation education and a solution to this. I'm encouraged. The President stood up a task force to look at China. The Department has a task force to look at the China problem set. This will require us to go back to a competition focus, but this time it's a global competition focus, and it will come with the requirement to balance resources on a global basis. So that will determine how we do a prioritization of those resources. It's an opportunity for us to look at it.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is there's a lot of good things going on down there right now from the Defense Department, too, with our security cooperation, our foreign military sales, the education things that we do. So there may be certainly a lot of competition, but we're in the competition. I think that's important to recognize, and we need to stay in it. As Admiral Fowler pointed out, too, the vaccine's an important part of that. And as the administration's pledged all $4 billion to the COVAX initiative, that's going to be very helpful in helping out Central and South America also.
Thank you. Now yield back.
Time has expired. Mr. Panetta is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and appreciate, obviously, your service. Sunday, I just got back from McAllen, Texas, did a border visit. Obviously, got a limited view of the many challenges that just that one area faces when it comes to the migration that we're seeing right now, as well as the influx of narcotics that we're seeing hit our borders as well. Obviously, that was one of 5 times I've been to the border area. I'm from California, Central California, so going to the border is obviously eye-opening to me. But I've come away with the same impression each time I've been there, and that there needs to be more resources, obviously short-term in dealing with our border, but also long-term, looking beyond the border. And yes, looking at the Northern Triangle and Central American countries. Obviously providing resources, Admiral Fowler, as you mentioned, but unfortunately in April of 2019, what we saw is a freeze of $450 million of resources, similar to ones that you just spoke about in regards to programs that deal with violence prevention, poverty, and improving the justice systems. And so my question to you is, based on your last statement, has that set us back? The fact that we froze those programs, has that set us back in our efforts to help down there and work with the Northern Triangle countries?
I think, Congressman, consistent programs with the right policy and oversight hooks provide us more leverage over the long term. And when we, in the Foreign Ops Bill last year, zeroed out FMF, foreign military financing for the Northern Triangle, I think we lost leverage rather than gained leverage in terms of how we can help professionalize behavior. And some of the programs that are important that we rely on are our humanitarian assistance program. That's a win, and we've done well with that. We rely on our security cooperation program, where we install institutional capacity building advisors. It's a fancy name for an advisors in Minister of Defense's that can look after corruption-free programs. In fact, Monterey is the source of that, the Naval Postgraduate School. But being consistent with these programs year to year builds trust, and it takes time to build a professional, trusted institution and a partner.
Great. And obviously, when you say partner, it's very important in regards to the work that we do with these nations in that area. Is there anything else we can be doing at this point in dealing and trying continuing to build those partnerships?
Stay consistent with the exercise program. We're appreciative of the Department of Defense supported our program request for last year. We're very appreciative that we got a plus up on our security cooperation budget. We had 32% reduction over the previous 2 years. The department and the support of Congress arrested that slide. And those are key investments going forward to build the capacity of our partners. The reality is that partner nation militaries are involved in the internal problems that they have. It's just the reality. And they're professional, and they're the most trusted of all the security institutions in these countries, and we've got to stay with them because they want to emulate and model our professionalism. They learn it at our schools, and they learn it by example.
If you could, Admiral, go into briefly the Joint Interagency Task Force South and what work we're doing to continue. Like you said, you can't interdict our way out of it. Although we saw what the Border Patrol is doing there when they come to the ports of entry and the efforts that they are not doing, what else can we do beyond our borders when it comes to stopping that flow of narcotics?
Joint Interagency Task Force South in Key West is a team of teams. We have every partner nation, including Mexico, Canada, and our allies in Europe represented there. Despite COVID, they stepped up. When the U.S. stayed on the field, they stepped up and increased their interdictions from 50 to 60% participation rate. That's key. So we have to incentivize them to do that, recognize when they do, and Colombia is one of the countries that made a big impact. In fact, Costa Rica, Panama, Honduras, Guatemala all made impacts last year professionally in that space. So continuing to invest in that capability is a good deal and a good return on investment for the U.S.
Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Carl is recognized for 5 minutes. Turn your microphone on, sir. Sorry.
That always helps, doesn't it,
Yeah,
sir?
there we go. You're good.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, and I thank the witnesses for being here, and I certainly thank you for your service to this country. Admiral, over the recent years, we've heard an increasing role of China and played throughout the Central and South America. China has continued to invest in projects to improve their relationship with these countries, which that's what you've been highlighting here. And now your written testimony describes the increasing actions of China has taken through the diplomacy because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you explain on what China has been doing and how the Navy ships, hospital ships, can be used to combat these while continuing to advance our relationship in the region?
The National Defense Strategy and the Secretary of Defense's priorities rightly call out that China is a pacing threat and a competition that we have to win. And we have to recognize that they're the #1 trading partner with the United States, and they're our partner's #1 trading partner. So I don't ask them to choose, but I point out to our partners, whose gear would you rather work with? The United States, built in America, the best gear out there, the best equipment, best ships. Whose value system better matches your value system? And that's our competitive advantage. And our workers and our country is our competitive advantage. And so I go and I represent the best of the U.S., our servicemen and women and their equipment. And so we talk about the Navy and the importance of our Navy participating in exercises. And our Navy, with the support of SecDef, stepped up last year and supplied ships built in Alabama and all over this great nation to work with our partner nations. And they did really well in the exercises and the training programs. It works on interoperability, domain awareness, things that General VanHerck has cited as are important to defending our nation and important to building our strong alliance and partnerships globally.
Thank you, sir. Second question, given the upkeep and requirements of our Navy hospital ships right now, we have two, correct? We have one in dry dock right now, and one is on the East Coast?
Correct, sir.
Got that right?
Mercy
Yeah.
and the Comfort.
Yeah, given the upkeep requirements for both of those and these aging ships, how could increasing the number of Navy medical ships help in the response to China's activity in the AOR?
Our partnerships, one of the strongest aspects of them has been our outreach and humanitarian assistance and medical assistance. And I've seen firsthand the power of two Comfort deployments during my tour, where you send an outstretched hand, you help a mother with their son or daughter that's never been to a doctor. They're 8 years old, 9 years old, and you see the value of that to win hearts and minds, and the value of that is it shows the best of America. So that capacity in winning the day-to-day competition and then being able to respond in a competitor fight, a global war, is important. So to me, it's how the services, the Navy, working with the Secretary of Defense, best resources that, but it's really important that we never lose that capability to be able to supply to the combatant commanders in peace so that we never have to fight.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank you. Mr. Vesey is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General VanHerck, I wanted to ask you about the weather event that we had in Texas. I know that Northcom works very closely with FEMA and DOD when it comes to natural disasters. And I was hoping that you'd be able to talk a little bit about what the response was to the power outage in Texas and how DOD responded to the event.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So defense support of civil authorities is obviously a crucial mission at United States Northcom and something that we do as a no-fail mission. Our direct support to that was in support of lead federal agency, in this case FEMA, to provide generator support to where there was no electrical power to sustain hospitals and those kinds of things. And the result of this is to take a look at our overarching resiliency as a nation, something that we do routinely to ensure that from a defense of the homeland, that's factored into any potential not only disaster but attack on our homeland. And so working with the interagency, we continue to analyze the resiliency overall from that event you're referring to.
Is there anything that you learned from that event that can help us better prepare in the future? Obviously, there's still a great amount of concern. The state legislature right now is looking at, what sort of safeguards they can possibly put in place to try to prevent something like that from ever happening again. Are there, with it being, so many people that were affected by that storm, is there something that you think needs to happen or that you're going to be looking at to where we can better respond in the future?
So I would say that the largest lesson out of that should be applied to the fact that although this was a natural disaster, that somebody with nefarious activity could take some kind of action that would put us in a precarious situation just like that. They'll learn, they'll see the potential vulnerabilities, and they'll take action. So us as not only the Department of Defense within the interagency should exercise this. We should work through the command and control of the future to ensure that we're in a properly positioned place to command and control and look at our resiliency.
Thank you very much. Admiral Fowler, you were asked a question earlier about Colombia and some of the successes that they've had there post Medellin and Cali cartels when that country was a complete wreck.
No, that's fine. I'd like to hear it. That's good.
I think Brett sent some more questions.
Yeah, I think they're right here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And wanted to ask you specifically about what sort of if today you could implement something to try to stabilize the countries where we see most of the migration heading north to our southern border, what would be the first thing that you would implement, and what sort of requirements, maybe requirement is not the best word, but what should be the expectation from a country like Honduras, where there's just such a long history of of corruption, to be quite frank. Like what should should be asked of them in order to make anything that you would implement be a success?
Thank you for recognizing the professionalism and the excellence of the Colombian security forces. They work hard every day at that and emulate our values in that respect. I would ask support for a legislative proposal that we have submitted to Congress for the U.S. Colombia Action Plan. It's a plan that is an offshoot of Plan Colombia that helps use security cooperation to fund a regional approach. Colombia is now a net exporter of professional security and has trained thousands of Central American, Northern Triangle nations' security forces, and the cultural fit is a very good one, and they've trained them to do professional work. They're willing to contribute with some additional funding here. I would also ask support for our institutional capacity building efforts, where we put these advisors that are trained at the Institute in Monterrey in a host nation. We could, for example, with additional funding and support, embed one in the Ministry of Defense for Honduras. We know who the trusted partners are, and the Minister of Defense and his team are trying to do the right thing in Honduras. We know, working with other agencies, that they're trusted, and by putting an advisor in, we could provide the right system and overall view to add transparency, so we can account correctly to Congress, your oversight role, that the dollars are being spent in a right way and invested, that's going to be a return on investment for the U.S.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Jackson is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Rogers, and to our witnesses for being here today. While we spend much of our time talking about the threats posed by China and Russia, people need to understand, I think, that those threats are not limited to geographic locations. The threat and the influence imposed by China and Russia impacts both Northcom and Southcom AORs. The National Defense Strategy correctly prioritizes competition with China and Russia, and the Department has seen great progress over the last 4 years in confronting that challenge. With looming budget cuts in the pipeline, any advantage we may have that could be wiped out by malign espionage efforts influenced by China, Russia, Iran, North Korea through their proximity to our military installations. While there are conflicting views on this committee about many topics, I would hope that one view we all share is that our adversaries should not be the owners and operators of any facility that is anywhere close to a United States military installation. With that said, I'm worried about the potential espionage efforts related to this particular issue. Mr. Salesses, could you speak to the threat that would be posed by China or any other adversary and their ability to purchase real estate near an installation and the intelligence threat that could pose to our country?
Congressman, thanks for the question. Obviously, that would be a very significant challenge, and we need to, I know that has come up around the country a couple of times, and we work very closely with the Justice Department and other organizations that would be involved in those kinds of activities and how we could limit that kind of activity here in the country.
Thank you, sir. I have one more question. The threat posed by China and our adversaries is of grave concern worldwide. However, there are things that threaten our military's ability to train here in the United States as well. While we as a country begin to look at renewable sources of energy such as wind, one thing that has not always been considered is the impact that construction of these projects can have on our readiness levels. It's critical that the young men and women training in the United States are able to do so in order to prepare for the threats that they may face when they are deployed. General, could you speak about the detrimental effects that wind farms can have on our military training routes? What steps are being taken to mitigate that impact and the overall readiness impact that occurs when we are forced to reduce the number of low-level MTRs flown out of pilot training bases such as the one in my district, Shepherd Air Force Base?
Congressman, that's probably best answered by the service, but I would tell you that there is a detrimental effect that could limit our ability to train here in the United States, would have potential readiness impacts. What's crucial is that we have a partnership, local partnerships with local commanders, with the local civic leaders, the mayors, et cetera, that more broadly also includes a broader discussion, a national security discussion, so that we can come to a solution for business, folks that want to have make that money, for renewable energy, as you pointed out, to make us resilient as well, and the potential impacts on national security. And that discussion has to happen anytime there is a potential building of some kind of facility that could impact training.
Yes, sir, I agree with you, and I think that it'll be our job as legislatures to make sure that that happens before this stuff is put into place, because that's what I've seen at Shepherd Air Force Base, and it goes back to my first question as well. If we don't think about those things up front, then that stuff's going to happen before we realize it, and then we're going to be in a position where we can't go back and undermine that. I thank you all for your thoughtful responses. We face threats across the globe, and unfortunately, even some here at home. I look forward to working with each of you and with all of my colleagues here on the committee to provide our military with the resources and the authorities that we need to protect our country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank you. Ms. Strickland is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Smith and Ranking Member Rogers, and to our witnesses. I have the privilege of representing the Western Area Defense Sector, WADS, which is one of the 2 sectors responsible for peacetime air sovereignty, strategic air defense, and airborne counter-drug operations in the continental U.S. under NORAD. As we continue to implement the national security strategy, we must continue to ensure that our homeland assets are a deterrent to our adversaries. I strongly support ensuring that WADS has the resources it needs to continue to defend our homeland. General VanHerck, I'd like to start with you, and I have a few questions, one about WADS and then another about hypersonics detection, if we can get there. One of the innovations that NORAD is working on is Pathfinder, which previously took separate data systems and combined them so NORAD can see a more complete picture. I know that a contract was recently awarded, so can you please tell me how the integration is going, if there are any difficulties, and why you think Pathfinder is so important to the concept of an all-domain awareness? Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, ma'am, to talk about Pathfinder. Pathfinder is an innovative capability that we've designed to do exactly what you talked about, and working in a partnership to take data and information, which, by the way, I think is a strategic value, something that we need to utilize. Pathfinder ingests data from multiple sources, infuses that data, and uses machine learning and intelligence capabilities to process and share in real time. But previously to Pathfinder, we had 12 manual systems, phone calls, those kinds of things that would take longer, minutes, if not longer. Today, when you utilize Pathfinder, it gives us a picture in seconds or less, and a much more broadly a picture to help our air defense sectors accomplish our mission of defending our homeland. Pathfinder is going great. The Canadians just gave us some additional funding to continue the program, and we look forward to moving that forward. I'll give you an example real quick, and I don't want to steal too much of your time, but Pathfinder was utilized, if you remember, in 2015, the gyrocopter that flew down from north in the National Capital Region here and landed on the Capitol lawn. When you take all the sensors in the National Capital Region and you look at them separately, none of the sensors detected that gyrocopter. When you take all those sensors, we took the real data, and you take those sensors and you fuse it into Pathfinder into a single system that aggregates that data and assesses it. Sure enough, we were able to see that gyrocopter. That's the value of information and data. Previously, the data was left on the cutting room floor and not analyzed. Pathfinder analyzes it. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about that.
Great, thank you. And it just really underscores how we talk a lot about data, but it actually helps us make good decisions. So I want to switch over to hypersonics detection and stay with General VanHerck. As a commander of Northcom and NORAD, what do you see as the most critical gap that must be filled in regard to sensor coverage of the U.S. for advancing Russian and Chinese threats of advanced cruise and hypersonic missiles? And as the Air Force completes their analysis of alternatives of northern approaches, have Northcom and NORAD priorities been accounted for in that final product that we get?
Well, I look forward to seeing the product as the Air Force completes it. I do believe that our equities will be accounted for in the product, but I haven't seen the final product. It's still with the Air Force. Specific domain awareness is what we need for NORAD and United States Northern Command, and that's in my priorities that you'll see in my statement and my priority list that I submitted to the department. Domain awareness to get further out. Today, competitors have increased capabilities. The Russians can actually shoot from over the Russian homeland and strike the continental United States. And so we need over-the-horizon radars and those kinds of capabilities. Specifically with regards to hypersonic capabilities, I remain concerned. We're focused on offensive hypersonic capabilities, and that's crucial to our overarching deterrent. But just as important is our ability to detect, have a threat assessment, threat warning, and attack assessment for hypersonics coming in. And that's part of our deterrence by denial. And any solution that we come up with for hypersonics should not be just a sensor that tells us what's inbound, but it ought to be able to deliver weapons quality information so that we could actually negate that threat from a hypersonic vehicle that may be inbound. And by the way, hypersonics are here today. The Russians have fielded them. That's not something in the future. They're absolutely a threat right here and right now.
Great. And very quickly, do you think Canada is doing its part to equitably contribute to hypersonics?
Canada is a wonderful ally and does a great thing specific with the North Warning System and our legacy systems. They've funded about 60% of that over time. Going forward, what we really need to do, ma'am, is create the framework for NORAD modernization. I'm encouraged by the President and the Prime Minister talking about it, but there's much more work to do on what that framework will look like in the future.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Miss McLean, sorry, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and thank you for your service. As it pertains to national security, I've heard a lot of words today, rule of law, human rights, deterrence, and really consistencies with our programs and our policies. With that said, General Herrick, as we know, the disastrous situation at our southern border is not only a humanitarian crisis, but a national security crisis where former President Trump had the border secured. My question is simple. Has President Biden's actions to reopen the southern border and encourage migrants to illegally cross our border made the United States safer or less safe? And do President Biden's border policies threaten the security and stability in Mexico and the Northern Triangle?
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about national security. I'm not going to comment about the specifics on policies. I would ask the President and defer to him about those, but I would tell you that we have a national security imperative right now on our southern border that we need to deal with. Admiral Fowler made it very clear in his comments about the confluence of things that have come together. Transnational criminal organizations create an environment not conducive to successful rearing of families, employment, economics, et cetera. Combine that with COVID and 2 major natural disasters, and you have a confluence of things ongoing. I would say there's a perception that, folks can come here and bring your family with you. What we need to do is approach this from a national security imperative and come up with a whole of government problem that will secure our borders. I'm concerned from a homeland defense perspective. I believe the symptoms that we're seeing today are exactly that. They're symptoms: migration, counter-narcotics, human trafficking. The problem and the challenge is creating an environment where these folks can succeed so they don't have to feel like they migrate. And that takes a whole-of-nation approach to get after transnational criminal organizations. We figured this out with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. You can cut off their funding. You can do additional things as a whole of government, working with allies and partners to get after this problem. And so I look forward, I believe the administration is on a good track there. I look forward to seeing where it goes.
Thank you. As we know, perception's 90% of reality. I'm going to switch gears for a moment. My next question is for all the witnesses. As we know, China has become an ever-increasingly threat, not only to the Pacific region, but globally. In addition to the buildup in their armed forces, they've been developing 5G technology, as we've discussed earlier. And the United States, it appears, is falling further behind in this regard. My question is this to each of you. Would a 5G secured network accessible anywhere in the world to our forward operating bases or other command centers for transmission of data be a priority for U.S. North and Southcoms?
Congresswoman, any secure network would be very helpful. The question is, you know, what are the other things that we're balancing against that? So I agree that any secure network would be helpful, but we'll have to look at what other challenges we have associated with that.
When I sit down with our partners, their cybersecurity is in the top 3 of all their security challenges, and that's at every level in that partner. And it's in our top 3 as well. So it's important that we get this right. And we know there is no civil-military divide by law in the People's Republic of China. And so Any investment in Huawei and ZTE and their 5G is a direct pipeline to the PLA and their intelligence services, and I point this out to our partners at each and every visit and every time. And at a professional level, they get it, and they don't want to invest in that technology. They want to invest in secure technology, clean technology, U.S. or other trusted partner technology, and it's important that initiatives come forward that allow them an option to do that.
To directly answer your question, it would be incredibly valuable to have 5G secure technology, and we've moved out on that at United States Northern Command. Our J6 is very innovative. J6 does our command and control and those kinds of things. Gives us resiliency as a nation, candidly. Today, I'm able to take a single device to do unclassified and classified information from any location and have resiliency, not reaching back to a single building or a single server, if you will, but can access multiple servers. That's incredibly valuable going forward in a crisis, whether that be crisis from a natural disaster or a potential attack on the homeland.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Ms. Jacobs is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our witnesses for being here. First, I'd just like to say to my colleagues who are expressing concern about the southern border, as a representative of San Diego, we feel very safe, and I think we know that the root causes are really the key to making sure that this situation abates. And on the question of root causes, Admiral Fowler, I'd like to ask you, as you referenced in your testimony, Latin America militaries and militia groups have a history of violating human rights, and these violations have sometimes been ignored or even encouraged by the United States. Throughout the civil wars of the 1990s, we saw special forces trained by the U.S. were used to commit these abuses. So given that reality, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about our current train and equip missions that Southcom is conducting and how you're working to prevent these types of violations from occurring.
Thank you. It's an important question. We've learned from that history. Southcom has a human rights program, the only combatant command to have one. It's now in its 20th plus year, and we've invested our own money in increasing the capacity of that program. We use that program with our partners. We have helped our partners, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, install human rights observers and advisors in their ministries and with their chiefs of defense. We hold seminars. And I routinely, through that program, meet with the human rights NGOs in the United States and in partner nations, for example, in Guatemala, to listen to their concerns. These important NGO partners, they know their stuff, and they have on-the-ground insights, and we take it very, very seriously. And then we apply that into our Leahy vetting process, which is another extremely important program that we should look to enhance, frankly, and really embed in a systematic way within the department and make it very consistent. These programs have helped change behavior over time. And while not perfect, we've made progress. And particularly in the last year, when there was every reason for partner nations, their militaries, that's what I can speak to turn inward, they didn't, and they acted professionally. There was some reports here and there, but by and large, they acted professionally. You can't assume that that will be future performance, but the building blocks are in place to have a better professional performance going forward, and I assure you we're committed to that at our headquarters and in our training and education programs.
Thank you. And still to you, Admiral Fowler. I think, as we have talked about the region, and we often emphasize our willing partners, especially, for instance, the Colombian government, I was wondering how you believe this partnership will serve the U.S. goals in the region as it relates to any peace deal with FARC or any potential peace deal with the ELN.
Well, certainly we support our partners in information sharing. That's really key to understanding what promises are made, what promises are being broken. It's unfortunate the Venezuelan crisis has just made all that worse. I mean, Venezuela is essentially a paradise for narco traffickers, and Maduro and his illegitimate government and the military are profiting from that. And by creating that safe haven and encouraging them being the FARC dissidents and the ELN, it has compounded the situation. The 5 million migrants that have been pushed out by the human rights abuses of the Maduro regime have also compounded it. Columbia has really overall just behaved and performed with humanity as accepting these migrants. And so we're with them. We talk to them every day and share information, and it's largely in their ministry and government levels. So I just provide and share information with my counterpart, General Navarro, who is just a wonderful professional interlocutor.
Thank you. Thank you for your long service to our country. And Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Bice is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and thank you for the witnesses being here and for your service. To each of you, in the hearing memo, it listed in the last 2 years, $250 million has been spent, DoD dollars have been spent for DHS border support. Will you be reimbursed for those dollars? And if not, what programs are going to be impacted by the $250 million that you've lost in funding?
So, Congressman, I'll take that question. We have not been reimbursed. It was done on a non-reimbursable basis. And that funding came out of the defense budget and other places, probably impacted, depending on where the money was taken, depending what it impacted. It's probably training, some personnel costs, and those types of things where the services had available money to use in that case.
So when we're talking about funding, you're asking for additional funding to make sure that you have the resources needed, but in fact, you're actually having dollars pulled away from you in other ways, including to support DHS border support, that do impact the readiness and availability of the forces, it seems. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. My second question is, in the last 6 years, the United States has spent over $3.5 billion in strategy and engagement for Central America. Do you believe that we're getting a return on our investment, given that we've seen a tremendous amount of influx of migrants from the Northern Triangle area, which is where the bulk of these dollars have been going? And I open that for any of the witnesses.
Consistency in our programs is as important as the dollar amount. And we've been in extremely good discussions. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs and SecDef have been excellent at asking for our advice on what might work and will work as part of the administration's $4 billion multi-year plan. And we're encouraged by the long look of this program. It takes time for partners, security forces, I can speak to military, to implement programs that they can responsibly and professionally enact that will make a difference in tamping down the violence. And I know State Department, we work hand in hand with State Department on this, is committed through their INL to the same professionalization of the police forces. The issue has been that we have not applied this consistently. It's been started and stopped. And so while there may have been a high dollar value, it's hard to make the argument that it was consistently applied over the time period that would be required to make a difference.
Thank you for that. Last question, Mr. Salas, is have you been requested to provide additional border support or security for fiscal year 22? And if so, what are the conversations surrounding that?
We have not been requested, but obviously we're talking to DHS because, as you're aware, Congressman, we have military members on the border right now and have consistently provided military members over the last several years and supported DHS's mission. Currently, there is no request for 22, but that doesn't mean that we may not get a request for 22.
And the requests that you have received over the last, let's say, several months, is that impacting reserves or National Guard readiness? They're being pulled away to help support what's happening on the southern border?
I don't believe so, Congresswoman. The force that is down there now, even though it's National Guard members, was brought on as Title X because it was part of their time to come on duty, full-time duty, and so that we were able to make use of that by having them come on duty during this period.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Morelli is recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this very, very important hearing. And I want to thank the witnesses for being here today to share your expertise and also your dedication to our nation's safety and security. I am a new member of this committee, and so some of my questions will seem pretty basic. I'm just trying to get a level set. But I'd like to hear, General, a little more about Northcom's mission associated with the Arctic. and appreciate the questions that my colleagues have asked up to this point about it. But General, if I were to go back home and talk to constituents and talk about the importance of the Arctic to the United States and the challenges associated, what would I say? How would I describe to them the importance of the Arctic as a region, and then also the challenges specifically associated with the Arctic?
Thanks, Congressman. The Arctic is very important, and the environmental changes that have been ongoing have allowed increased access to the Arctic. The Arctic has tremendous resources, natural resources, and it's also a line of communication now with the environmental changes that have a flow from Asia to the European AOR and back and forth. And having that flow, the economic flow, is crucial to maintain for prosperity of not only our nation, but other nations around the globe. Russia gets 25% of their GDP from resources in the Arctic, so they absolutely have a vested interest in the Arctic, and they also want to ensure that it's secure for their efforts, if you will. What I would tell you is both Russia and China would like to change the international rules-based norms, and the consistency that we've had that has served the globe well since the end of World War II. So it's incumbent upon us to be persistent, working with allies and partners and like-minded nations to ensure that we maintain the consistency of the international rules-based norms and laws that have been served us well for over time.
So just so I might say it just so that I understand it, it's essentially the changes in climate then, I think that's what you're referring to in terms of environmental, make it more navigable, make it more accessible, and at the same time, our two adversaries want to change the rules that govern the region and how we have historically approached the region. Is that right? Did I get that?
Yes, so environmental change has created more access and opportunity. And both Russia and China are interested in ensuring that the activities conducted in the Arctic are favorable to them individually, not necessarily the international community.
So talk to me a little bit about that. So what type of investments and capabilities are they, or types of investments that are making in capabilities that increase that concern? Could you give me a little specificity around that, those investments?
Sure. Russia has taken a dozen or so military installations that after the Cold War sat dormant, and they've revitalized those. They have worked hard on their nuclear capabilities and revitalized those as well to include their bombers and infrastructure. Not only are they placing defensive capabilities that they state are obviously for defensive purposes, they're putting offensive capabilities into the Arctic, capabilities which are capable of not only striking Canada and North America, but obviously our homeland. China calls himself a near-Arctic nation and wants to be influential in the Arctic as well. I would remind the committee that next month in May, Russia takes over the Arctic Council. It's very important for us to ensure that like-minded nations, allies, and partners are well aligned as we go into this, because Russia and China will try to exploit any gaps or seams.
Thank you. If I could just stay on the subject just for a moment more as I use the balance of my time here. As we assess our capabilities in the Arctic, talk a little bit about the challenge you find with the extreme cold, ice, high altitude on our military equipment, and is there anything we should be doing in terms of working with industry on innovations that help address those needs, and have you began pursuing those partnerships? Are we engaged with partnerships already in that regard?
Thanks, Congressman. I think that's a great question. And so I do think there's more we can be doing. And units that are organized, trained, and equipped and ready to operate in the Arctic is crucial. I believe that we need to do a better job of identifying those units, enabling them through day-to-day competition to practice their operations, and working closely with industry, as you point out, to ensure that the capabilities that we do develop are conducive for successful operations in the Arctic. That goes from the human asset all the way to specific platforms and capabilities overall.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank you. Mr. Waltz is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Fowler, I'm struck, and I would encourage my colleagues to look at your chart here of Chinese activity in South Central America. Just some of the key things hopping out at me: 25 out of the 33 countries hosting Chinese infrastructure projects, 60 ports, 70% increase in Chinese Navy port calls, nearly $1 billion in weapons sales, and most importantly, or at least most disturbingly, I think, both sides of the Panama Canal, with now owned in some way, shape, or fashion by the Chinese in controlling that strategic choke point. So, leads me to wonder, is the Monroe Doctrine dead, or at least on life support? And if you could elaborate a bit more on what you're doing with the interagency, because we're talking military tools here, which are critical, and I certainly support security assistance and increasing your security assistance efforts. But these are non-military tools, and what tools do you need, and what tools does the interagency need to combat this and to compete?
Certainly, the statistics you cite fuel a sense of urgency with respect to strengthening our partnerships. Partnerships are key. We like to think of it as a good neighbor doctrine. It resonates. Good neighbors have like values, and values are our strength in this hemisphere. We recently visited Argentina. They want to do more with us. They want to partner with us at a mill-to-mill level. We've got to do everything we can.
Which, by the way, now Argentina has a Chinese space tracking station, which lines up with our polar launches out of Vandenberg Air Force Base.
We discussed those important issues. We've got to look to the Antarctic as well as the Arctic. China has a growing interest there. We visited Ushuaia, which is the furthest port in this hemisphere, the continental hemisphere, and it's important access. You mentioned the Panama Canal. Panama, under the current leadership there, their President Cortizo has opened with renewed commitment to a relationship with the United States. We're working on that with our Department of State. That's important. Panama is a very strategic partner with very professional security forces, and those are the investments we need to make. A small investment in security cooperation, a little goes a long way. A business person, you'd invest in it. It's a high PE stock.
No, thank you, Admiral. And I would also note, we're on the verge of having Barbados, Haiti, Honduras potentially switch their recognition of Taiwan port projects in Honduras, Cuba, and in general, and also under your purview, the Bahamas as well, in addition to potential fishing rights going to the Chinese next to our underwater testing facilities. Is that correct?
China is very aggressive in the Bahamas right now with the new ambassador that's very aggressive. They have the largest embassy in the Bahamas right now, and they continue to buy up tourism industry to have access and influence. And you're exactly right. They do have access right now to an overwatch, if you will, of our Navy test and training facilities, which is very, very concerning. We're partnering closely with the Royal Bahamian Defense Force. They're fantastic partners for domain awareness, putting capabilities in the South right now for domain awareness, such as a radar. This year we'll put one into Nassau as well to give us additional capabilities. But a little will go a long ways for investment with regards to Bahamas and Mexico.
Thank you. Just switching to the other, the other from the Bahamas to the Arctic, and adding to some of my colleagues. My understanding, the Coast Guard has one operational icebreaker that's about 60 years old, one under construction. The Russians have dozens. Northwest Passage is now open for shipping, along with shipping from across the north side of Russia from Asia to Europe. Do we need more icebreakers?
Congressman, for persistence, I support the current plan for additional icebreakers for the Coast Guard. Your numbers are correct. They have two signed. They had a fire on one. They're about to resurrect that, which will end up with two. But for persistence, we do need extra icebreakers.
Great. And just with my remaining time, thank you for that, General. Admiral Fowler, if you could send to my office for the record your legislative proposal on adding to Plan Columbia, and I would just mention to my colleagues, we've had special forces in Colombia with an all-of-government effort now for 30 years. So there's a lot of discussion in Washington these days of endless wars, but that persistent engagement can be incredibly effective. Please send that over. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired.